Before we begin, I just want to mention that yesterday was the passing of Rabbi Moshe Kolarski, who was a dear friend of mine and is known all over the world for his many accomplishments as the Rebbe's shliach to the shluchim, I guess you might call it. Rabbi Kolarski was involved in so many stories as far as implementing the Rebbe's vision all over the world in really every corner of the globe. And it's a tremendous loss for Klal Yisrael, but also it's a personal loss for me. And I'll be heading straight to the Levaya from here, from this class, so I might actually cut things a little bit short. But today's learning should be a merit for Moshe Yehuda ben Tzvi Yosef, and he should intercede on our behalf. And Mashiach now. Okay. So we're learning, and
he was very young.
And
he was very young.
So his birthday is actually Rosh Chodesh Sivan. So he would have been 75 on his birthday, and he's truly an irreplaceable person. So, and I thought about whether we should have the class because obviously also here in the Five Towns, his daughter Chani Wallowik is the shlucha here with her husband, with Rabbi Zalman Wallowik, and so it was questionable. I was thinking, should we, sort of like the whole community is in mourning to a certain extent, but I thought about it for half a second, and I knew that if I would ask Rabbi Moshe if I should give the shir before his levaya, he would tell me it's not even a question. You're going to go teach the Rebbe's Maamar, and you don't question that. We're going to learn Chassidus, and that's it. So I'm sure, I have no question in my mind, he would actually be annoyed if I would tell him that I didn't give the shir because I wanted to be, on time for the levaya. So, Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to do both. All right. We're on chapter 4 of the Maamar, Vayidaber Elokim, Tavshin Chaf Tes. Vayidaber Elokim is the intro to the Seres HaDibros, to the Ten Commandments. So just a little recap. This phrase, Vayidaber Elokim, Lamar, is a common combination of words in Torah. And generally what it means is Vayidaber Elokim, Hashem said, Lamar, saying that whatever Hashem said, usually to Moshe Rabbeinu, should then be conveyed to others. Meaning Hashem said it and said, pass on the message. In this case, when it's the Seres HaDibros, you can't say that because everyone was there. So who are you going to tell? You had to have been there? Yeah, but you were there. Everyone was at Matan Torah. So we had to come up with a different, in this context, with a different interpretation of what Lamar means. So we said there are a few different interpretations. One is that when we learn Torah, Hashem learns Torah with us. So the Lamar is our speaking gets Hashem to mirror our speech. Conversely, Lamar also means that when we speak Torah, we are speaking Hashem's speech. So it's sort of, he speaks what we're speaking, but ultimately, what are we speaking when we're learning Torah? What he's speaking. So that there's that dynamism in learning Torah. We also said that Lamar means like Asara Maimaris, the 10 utterances of creation, that through the Seres HaDibros, through the revelation at Sinai, the Torah, which is higher than world, became drawn down into world, and in fact that happens every time we learn. Yeah.
Your mic is on the table.
My mic's on the table. Oh my goodness. Thank you. I'm a little bit, my mic was on the table. Thank you for interrupting and telling me that. Okay. Hopefully we'll be able to pick up the sound. Yeah, I'm a little farnuman. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So then we got into a discussion that Rebbe was teaching us the Rebbe Marash's Maamar that was said 100 years before this Maamar. And we spoke about the Medrashim and the Yalkut Shmeini, about why Hashem says, Anech Hashem Alekecha, singular. And also, what does it mean that Torah was said differently to the different capacities of the young and the old. And basically, the Rebbe says that it means that not only was Torah said to the individual, but it was said to the individual bodies. You remember that? That point that the Rebbe brings out, that was the Rebbe's chidush in interpreting what the Rebbe Marash was saying. And a lot of this Maamar is about unpacking the Maamar of the Rebbe Marash, which was said 100 years before this Maamar. Okay, and then we started speaking about this idea of the body. We said how the angels are connected to the name Elokim, and the neshamas are connected to the name Havaya, and which means a much higher level of bittul. And we spoke about what is this power in the world that allows Havaya to come down into the world. It's a power greater than Havaya. It's the Anoichi Havaya Lekecha. Anoichi is the personal pronoun. Hashem, whoever he is, without a name, higher than a name. And okay, so basically that's where we left off, the first 3 chapters. And any questions? Just clarifying what we've done, where we've been, or we're ready to go into chapter 4. Ready to go into chapter 4? Yeah. Okay. All right. Ve'inyan shem Havaya shebechol echad miYisrael. So now let's talk about the name Havaya, specifically this name Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is this lofty name, higher than Elokim, as it is present within the individual. Like we were saying, the whole idea is that Matan Torah was to the individual. Mevar b'hamaimer, he explains in in the Maamar. When he says in the Maamar, he means in the Rebbe Marash's Maamar that was said 100 years earlier. Sha'yud d'shem Havaya sheb'Yisrael hu ha'chochma shebenefesh. The Yud of Yud Kei Vav Kei, as it's represented in the Jew, is the koyach of chochma in the nefesh. Okay. So this is actually a well-known concept. It's actually in Igeres HaTshuva, which is the third section of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe speaks about this at length, that Yud Kei Vav Kei is a map of Seder Ishtauslis, of the worlds, but it's also in microcosm, that same pattern is reiterated in the structure of the nefesh. So you can use Yud Kei Vav Kei as a map of the Elamais, and you could also use it as a map of the Koiches HaNefesh. I'm using a lot of Hebrew words here. So when you talk about the worlds, so Yud Kei Vav Kei, Yud is Atzilos, which is a world of bittul, and the Yud is a little dot. It's compressed, it's bittul. And then Hey is Bria, and then Vav is Yitzira, and then the lower Hey is Asiya. So that's in worlds. But also the worlds correspond to different spherois. Each world has a primary sphera, which is most emphasized in that world. So then the Yud is Chochma. And again, Chochma is that tiny little kernel of an idea. So that's the Yud, which is the hypercompressed dot. And then Hey is Bina, which expands it. Hey is a wide letter. It's an expansive letter. And then Vav is the Midos, which draws that down into emotion. It takes the intellect and draws it down to emotion. And then the lower Hey is the expansive Hey again, but it expands it into Malchus. So that's in Seder Ishtauslis. That's a map of reality. But it's also represented in microcosm in the structure of the Eser Koiches HaNefesh, that we're built the same way. So in the person, you have Chochma, that's the Yud of the person, and you have the Bina, which is the Hey. He's going to proceed to explain all of this. Okay, so in the Maamar, in the Rebbe Marash's Maamar, mentions that where do you see that Yud Kei Vav Kei is connected to the individual? You see it in that the 10 soul powers are configured in a way that comports with the structure of Yud Kei Vav Kei. And namely, well, we're going to categorize the different aspects of it, that Yud is represented by Chochma shebenefesh. V'hei d'shem Havayahu habina shebenefesh. And the Hey is the capacity for Bina, for elaborative thought. Lahavin davar mitoich davar. And what is Bina? It is lahavin davar mitoich davar. And if you look in the footnote, it says Loshen Chazal, Chagiga Yud Dalad Aleph, Sanhedrin Tzadik Gimel Beis. So the term Lahavin Davar Mitoich Davar, to understand something from another something, is originally an expression that's used in the Gemara, and there's two sources for it in Gemara. I'm not sure why they don't write it in the footnote here, but that's also the exact phrase that's used in Perek Gimel in chapter 3 of Tanya, when the Alter Rebbe is explaining what Bina is. He says it's the capacity to be Maven Davar Mitoich Davar. And we're going to actually go into this in depth. What does this phrase mean? The Lahavin Davar Mitoich Davar. Okay, but let's just understand the basic translation and why we're speaking about this. All right, basic translation is Bina is, we translate it as understanding, but that's a silly translation. Bina is Lahavin Davar Mitoich Davar, to understand something from something. In other words, to be able to pick up on something that's not stated explicitly, to be able to think, to intuitive thinking, or to extrapolate. So to know what you didn't tell me, to read between the lines, to take a hint, to infer. Yeah, inference. Inference is a great word for it. So lahavin davar mitoich davar, to figure out one thing from another thing. In other words, if I tell you 2, 4, 6, 8, what's the next one? Who do we appreciate? Well, that's a different. It depends which path of Bina. Yeah, but if it's a pattern, if I 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I didn't say 10. How did you know 10? Because you were maven davar mitoich davar. You figured out there's a pattern, and then you extrapolated what would be the next thing in that pattern. Okay.
Is that like how halacha works? Right? You take things from the Gemara, the Ox, and all those, and then you bring it to...
That's an interesting question. Okay, I don't want to answer yes to that because I think it's more complex than that. But the point is there's a capacity within the nefesh, it's a spiritual power, to figure things out, to figure out one thing from something else. And why are we talking about this? What's the context? We're talking about this because we're establishing that the Shem Havaya is connected to every individual. And the way that you see that connection is that the configuration of Yud Kei Vav Kei is represented in the various soul powers of the soul. Yeah.
And we're saying the name Havaya is connected to each individual because that's how God...
Because Hashem said, how we got to this, because we said, Hashem said, Anechi Havaya Elekecha, individually, your God. Not Elekechem, collectively, Elekecha, your God. And so we're focusing on this idea that the name Havaya is connected to the individual. Where do you see that? You see that in that the same powers that are represented by the 4 letters of Hashem's name are then reiterated in the soul powers. Okay, so Bina is Lahavin Davar Mitoich Davar. V'toich Davar hu hadvar Havaya shmislabish b'seich hanivraim. And what is this Davar? Davar can mean a thing, it can mean a word. It's to infer the word that's inside. Toich davar, with the word that's inside, means the word of Hashem that's invested in the created being, enlivening it. Now, I want to stop here. There are many people present right now who are also learning Shari Yichud V'Amunah with me on Mondays. But we're not assuming that everybody here is coming to both classes. So I want to just give you acknowledgement. Yes, what you're hearing right now is very similar to what you've been learning in Shari Yichud V'Amunah. And if you'll remember, in chapter 1 of Shari Yichud V'Amunah, which is the second volume of Tanya, speaks there about how Hashem speaks the world into being. And there's a Dvar Hashem, there's a word of Hashem that's in everything, making it exist. So that's what we're referring to here again. This idea of the Dover, the word of Hashem, mitoich davar, from that which is inside of the word, remember this was in chapter 1 of Shari Yichud V'Amunah, like the Baal Shem Tov says, why does it say in Tehillim, forever, O Lord, your word is standing in the firmament? It means because Hashem is continuing to invest his speech, to put his Dvar Hashem into the firmament, and in fact into every created being. V'davar hu, and this davar, who had dibur atzmei, is the speech, Hashem's speech, shelamayla mislabshus b'nivroim, which is above being invested in the created beings. Hold on a second. It's invested or it's not invested? It's both. Very good. So there's a davar, mitoich davar. There's two davars here. There's the davar that is invested and the davar that is not invested. The bechlalosu oir hasayvev, and that, yeah, you knew you wanted me to go to save it.
Because I didn't want to be made fun of.
Okay. That the davar, he doesn't say mamala here, but you have to be maven davar meteich davar. He says soiviv, so bina. So the davar that is invested in the creation to make it exist, that's the mamale, the filling light. The soivev means the davar which can't be invested within the created being. It's too powerful, so it can't be contained within the created being.
It's also infinite.
Because it's infinite, it's transcendent. V'zehu lahaven davar mitoich davar, and that's what it means to understand a thing from inside a thing. Literally, mitoich means from inside a thing. Shayidei is beinis ba'dvar Hashem hamalubish b'seicha nivroim toich davar, that when you'll meditate on the word that's in the created being, the toich davar, shu ha'ar belvad, which you realize is only a glimmer, it's not the whole thing. And how do you know it's a glimmer? Inherently, it's obvious it's a glimmer because it can be invested and contained within a finite being. So if you think about that, boyim liyediyah, you'll come to the knowledge, meaning through inference, you'll conclude sheyeshnei davar, that there's also a davar, a divine speech, shelamayla mislabshus ba'elam, which is higher than being invested in the world. Shehu amaka shemimenu nimshacha arish bislabshus, and in fact, that davar, that higher davar, is the source from whence that lower davar, which is invested in the creation, emanates or originates. So to be maven davar miteich davar means this: you see that the world exists. You look at a created being and you say, there's a Dvar Hashem that's invested in that thing, giving it life, giving it existence. But that's not all there is. That's just a glimmer of Hashem that's expressed in this finite created being. I can infer from the fact that there is the Dvar Hashem that's in that thing, acting through that thing, giving created existence to that thing, there must also be a Dvar Hashem that can't be contained within that thing. So from Mamale, I can infer Soivev. So to be Maven Davar Miteich Davar means to figure out the Davar from what? The Toich Davar. Toich Davar means the word that's inside a created being, and that leads us to realize there must also be a word that's greater than being contained within a created thing.
Didn't we do a meditation on that?
Could be. Okay. All right, so you got what the hay is? This is the hay. The hay is the extrapolation that when you see that Hashem is in the world, there also must be Hashem as he is beyond the world. Okay. V'havav d'shem havaya hema midas shebenefesh. Okay, so now the vav. The vav are the midas. Why is vav the midas? A couple of reasons that are easy to explain very quickly. Vav is 6. There are 6 midas. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Also, vav is a pipeline. It's actually, all the Hebrew letters are also ideograms. Their drawings actually show the path. They're a physical representation, albeit, but it's not actually. You understand? It's just a picture, but. They depict the pathway of energy Each of these letters are building blocks of energy. So the Vav is a pipeline, like this. So it shows how the energy gets drawn down. And that's what the Midas do, the emotions that take the energy from intellect and draw it down. Okay. The Hey Achroina, the Shem Havaya, then the lower Hey, we said the higher Hey is Bina. The lower Hey, Hi Hayira Tata, is the lower fear. Call it, well, he's going to say in parentheses, Kabbalah's oil, acceptance of the yoke, Sheba Nefesh, that's in the soul. Let's call that the soul's basic feeling of subservience to Hashem. So there you have the Yud Kei Vav Kei as it is in the soul. The Yud is the Chochmah. He doesn't explain here at length what that is, but we know from Tanya that that's the capacity for self-sacrifice. You know, the Yud is Bittul. What's Bittul? Surrender. Okay. Then the Hey, we spoke about at length, is that ability to infer that there's a Dover, which is Soivev, which is higher than the world, and I figured that out, how Mitoich Dover, from the Dvar Havaya that's in the world. Okay. The Vav is the Midas, how all this gets drawn down. You know, you contemplate that there's a Dvar Hashem in the world, there's a Dvar Hashem that's beyond the world, and then how does that affect you emotionally? Okay, so that's the Vav, how it affects you emotionally. And then the Hey is basically the surrender. The surrender means, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to live differently? You know, behaviors. Malchus is expression. So how are you going to live differently based on that? Fine. So that's the map of Yud Kei Vav Kei in the Nefesh, in the Koiches HaNefesh. Umamshich b'hamaimer, and then the Rebbe Maharash continues and says, Shedala the Oisir the Shem Havaya shebechol echad miYisrael. Remember, we're speaking about the fact how the Shem Havaya is present in the individual, every individual. So he says, the Rebbe Maharash says that not only is Shem Havaya apparent in the configuration of the soul powers, Hem gam b'haguf shebei. The name Yud Kei Vav Kei is also manifested in the body in which the soul is contained. Wow. So that's pretty deep. You're saying Yud Kei Vav Kei is sort of like the imprint or the signature, not only in the soul, but in the body as well. That's what the Rebbe Maharash is saying. Okay, how so? Shahareishu Ketzir Tmunas Hayud. The head is like the Yud. A Yud is a dot. So picture a little dot. V'aguf Ketzir Tmunas Havav. The body is like a vav, like a line. Okay, so here's a dot, here's a line. I'm drawing a little stick figure guy, right? Like playing hangman. Here's the head, boop. Here's the body, zoop. You know those are the noises, right? Boop is a dot, zoop is a line. And it's zoop because it's a down line. I told you, it's hamshacha. It's a pipeline, it goes down. Okay? The hey etzbois shebiyad, the hey etzbois sheberegel, hein beis hahein. The 5 fingers of the hand and the 5 toes. You know in Yiddish how you say toes? Finger, yeah, Finger von Fuss. Foot fingers.
I don't know that many words.
Yeah. What's funny, in Fuss, also in Yiddish, Fuss is like the everything from the waist down is the Fuss. Yeah. Okay. Anyways. The 5 fingers of the hand and the 5 toes of the foot. So hey is 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So there's 2 heys. So the higher hey, your fingers, if you're standing right side up, so your hands are up on top and your feet are on the bottom. So you got 5 up here. You can't see it's off camera, but down here I got 5. Well, I'm wearing shoes anyway, so it wouldn't even help if the camera could. Even if you could pan down, I'm wearing shoes and socks. But you got 5 up here, high 5, that's the high 5. And then you get the 5 down there, which are the 5 toes. So you got the Yud, that's the boop. You got the Vav, whoop. And then you got the 5 here. That was totally spontaneous that I made up that noise. It works, yeah. And that I'm not confident about that sound, so I'm not going to repeat it when I do it for the feet. And then you got the 5 fingers of the toes. 5 toes. Okay. Okay. Oh, so you're going to point out, as you just did, that's only one side of the body. Okay. So that's a very valid question. Let's hang on and see if that's addressed. Okay. That's a valid point.
Well, Hashem mirrors us. So
Okay.
It becomes double.
So let's find out. I don't know. That's a very valid question. Okay. Umaysef b'hamaimer. And he goes on to explain the Rebbe Marash, the Yesh Leimar, that we can say, meaning this is the Rebbe Marash's Chiddush, the Hatam Sheyeshnam Eser Etzbais B'Yadayim V'Eser Etzbais B'Reglayim, who, why do you have 10 fingers and 10 toes? Because really you only need 5 fingers to be a hay, and 5 toes to be another hay. You need a high hay and the low hay. Hey lo, hey tato. The hey lo is the bina, and the hey tato is the malchus or kabbalah soil. So you got that. You got 5 fingers on the hand. You got 5 toes on the foot. You got your 5 and 5. You got your hay and your hay. So then why do we have? It seems extra. By the way, I love looking at it from this point of view. This is just a side point, but it just delights me. The question isn't, how come Hashem's name has hays? They should be 10, not 5. No, it's exactly the opposite. The question is, why do we need 10 fingers? You understand? The premise is, of course, it's a hay and a hay. So then we only really need 5 fingers and 5 toes. So what are we doing? The question is not on the name of Hashem. The question is on the anatomy of the body. So why do we have 10 fingers and 10 toes? We should just have 5 fingers and 5 toes, and that's enough to be hay and hay. All right. So the reason why indeed we do have 10 fingers and 10 toes, ki b'shem havaya b'meluyay hahayin, because it's the milui of Shem Havaya. Okay. Here's a little Kabbalah. So you're familiar with, okay, I don't want to over-explain this. All right, letters. You know what letters are, right? Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, right? Okay. Anyone play Scrabble? Okay. So you know one of the best tricks in Scrabble is to realize that a letter is a word. Spelling out a letter counts as a word. You just have to know how they're spelled. So like, for instance, like ES is S. The letter S is also a word. I believe it is spelled ES. All right. So the letters are also words. So for instance, and he's going to give Aleph as the example. Aleph isn't just Aleph. Aleph is actually Aleph Lamed Fei. Very good. All right. So Shem Havaya is Yud Kei Vav Kei. But then there's the Milui. So Milui means filled out. Okay, so what does it mean filled out? It means when you spell out fully each letter as a word. So, for instance, the Yud, you don't just say Yud, you say Yud Vav Daled. Yud is Yud Vav Daled. Okay. Now, Hey is interesting because it has different spellings. So that's why, this is what I was going to get into, and I decided not to get into it. But there are different shemais. You ever heard of like the concept of like Shem Ab and Sag and Ma and Ban? So I'm not going to get into that right now. But those are gematrias that are arrived at by doing different miluyim of the Shem Havaya based on how there are alternative spellings of these letters. So if you spell hey, the normal regular is hey, hey. So then you get one gematria. But if you spell hey, hey yud, then you get a different gematria. That's how those different names are arrived at. But again, I don't want to get into that right now. The conventional spelling of hey as a full word is hey, hey. So just like yud is yud vav dalid. So hey is hey, hey. So he says like this, right here is like this. The reason why we have 5 fingers on one side, 5 fingers on the other side, hold on a second, I only really need one group of 5 to be hey. He says, yeah, but it's the milui of hey. It's hey spelled out as a word, so it's hey, hey. And there's a higher one, higher hey, and a lower hey. So that's why 5 and 5 up here, 5 fingers on each hand, 5 and 5 up here, and then down on the feet, 5 toes and 5 toes. So it's the milui of the higher hey, 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 and the milui of the lower hey, 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 down there as well.
So it's not the milui of the yud and the vav.
Okay, that's an interesting question. Why? What do we do about the milui of the yud and the vav? It's an interesting question. And he doesn't address it here, so I'm not sure what the answer is. But this is from the Rebbe Marash, by the way. The Rebbe is saying what the Rebbe Marash says in the Maamar. And maybe if I would look more closely in the Rebbe Marash's Maamar and the source, I would be able to answer your question. But at any rate, the reason why we have the 5 and the 5 is to represent not just the higher hay and the lower hay, but the full out spelling of each of those hays. All right, so he explains that the reason is for the miluid hayin bechol hay yeshnam shnei hayin, that in each hay you have 2 hays. V'yesh leimer, now the Rebbe says his own chiddush. Dayedei sofa shamisper aser tzboyeshu keineged hahei b'miluyai. The Rebbe says, what can we... The Rebbe is using some bina here as well. He's being mevin davar miteich davar. The Rebbe Marash doesn't say this explicitly. But what can we extrapolate from the fact that the Rebbe Marash says that the 5 and 5 fingers on each hand, and the 5 and 5 toes on each foot, corresponds to not just the higher hay and the lower hay, but the full spelling of each of those hays. What can we figure out from that? The Rebbe says, it's actually enriching our entire understanding of the way Shem Havaya is expressed in the body. It's known regarding the miluyim. The reason why the letters are hidden, he gives an example, ukame ba'is aleph, in the letter aleph. Sha'aleph atzmehu begilui, the aleph is revealed, v'halamed v'apei shehema milui shaloi klulim boi behelim. The lamed and the pei are hidden. What does it mean hidden? They're not pronounced. You don't pronounce the lamed and the pei in an aleph, you just pronounce the aleph. When you're using the aleph to sound out words. When you're using an aleph as a letter, the way it functions, you don't pronounce that lamed and the pei. It's there, it's in the name of the aleph, but you don't use it when you're using an aleph to sound out a word. So the reason why it has those hidden letters, those unpronounced letters are actually higher. They're the inner core of the word. So the aleph part of the aleph is the more available part of it, and that's why it lends itself to being pronounced and revealed. But the lamed and pei part of the aleph are actually the deeper part of the aleph, and they can't be revealed. It's like a person who says something and he has intention behind his words. You hear his words, you don't hear his intention. So the lamed and the pei of the aleph are like the hidden intention. I can't read your mind. Right? That's the lamed and the pei, or the mind reading. All right. So a funny thing that Rebbe points out, the body, not the soul, specifically the body, depicts the milui of the hays. Not just one hay, but 2 hays. Hey, hey. Because the body is expressing the inner, usually unrevealed essence of Shem Havaya. Meaning, in the soul, the koiches hanefesh, yeah, it's aligned to Yud Ke Vav Ke, like we explained. But in the body, where you have the 10 fingers and the 10 toes, there you're getting the milui of the hays, you're getting a revelation of what is normally concealed. which is counterintuitive because you would think there's more revelation in the soul than in the body, and yet we're hearing that it's more so in the body. Ki kvar liyes hamshachas shem havaya beguf hagashmi. Oh, I'm sorry. Ki bichdei liyes hamshachas shem havaya beguf hagashmi. That in order for shem havaya to be drawn down into the physical body, hu dafka idei apnimius v'atzmus shem havaya. It requires the inner dimension of shem havaya. So don't wonder how the inner dimension of Shem Havaya is revealed in the body. That's inherently so, because in order for Shem Havaya to come down that low, it's got to be the essence of Shem Havaya. Val derech hamavur la'el sif gimel, like we explained similarly in chapter 3, shebichdei Shem Havaya shebehaneshama yeh begili gam be'islabshis beguf hu al yedei amshacha da'neich shelamayla mavaya. Like we explained before, that in order for the Shem Havaya to come down to the soul, to the individual, it requires the Anoichi, which is higher than the Havaya, which you said the Anoichi is the Atzmos, the essence of Hashem, which has the power to bring Havaya down to the individual. But this is actually what we're saying is even more. This is not just the Anoichi, which is a power that's higher than Havaya. This is the Milui of Havaya. This is the inner, hidden, concealed power of Havaya itself. What's the difference between these two concepts? שהחידש בגילוי דשם הוויה שבהנשמה גם בסלבשוס בגוף הוא רק בנגיע להמוקים גוף גשמי ששם נמשך הגילוי. When we say that the soul has a connection to Havaya, the chiddush there is really only that the soul, even in a body, has that connection. Okay, so the soul not just in heaven, but even the soul in a body. And it requires the power of Anoichi, which is higher than Havaya, to draw that Havaya down to the soul even when it's in a body. That's one thing. But then we said another thing. No, Havaya is also in the body itself. Not just Havaya is represented in the soul as it's in a body. Havaya is represented in the body. Now that's much more radical, because then you're talking about really two antithetical concepts, the Shem Havaya and the physical body. In order to manage that the Shem Havaya should be represented in the physical body, that's not facilitated merely by a power that's higher than Havaya, like we said before, that the power of Anoichi draws Havaya into the soul. No, this is much more. Because when you use a power that's greater to draw one thing down into another thing, it's acting as a catalyst, so to speak. But it doesn't change the thing itself. It just relocates it. It's just a change of venue. But it doesn't have an effect on the thing itself. In other words, to get the soul into the body is one thing. And to say that the Shem Havaya is connected to the soul even when it comes down to the body, that is facilitated by the Anoichi, which is higher than Havaya. But to say that Havaya is in the body itself, that's not a power higher than Havaya, namely Anoichi. That's the inner essence of Havaya itself, in other words, the milui of Havaya. That in order for Havaya to be represented in the body, that requires the inner latent essence of what Havaya really is, which means spelling out the letters, or is indicated by spelling out the letters. Shegam Havaya atzmei b'pnimiusai einei mugder begeder haruchni b'yocholte lies gam b'tzir deguf gashmi. What it means is that the name Havaya itself, if you really look into its depth, into its essence, it is not limited to be relegated merely to spiritual realms. If you look into the essence of Havaya, it is capable of expressing itself even in the physical body. But in order to see that, you have to look into the depths of Shem Havaya. And that's why the Hays have to be spelled out, because spelling it out means the unpacking which is normally unpronounced, revealing that which is normally latent and concealed. So we have this concept here that Shem Havaya is not only the signature of Hashem in the soul as represented by Eser Koiches and Nefesh. Shem Havaya is the imprint or the signature of Hashem in the body, and that in the body, it's an even greater expression of Havaya than in the soul. You follow that? Okay. Unfortunately, I'm going to leave now and go to 770 for the Levaya. Okay, so Mitzvah Shem will continue. We'll have to figure out when we're going to continue. Okay. All right.